Welcome to Humoranities with Sephora. I love pop music, and I loved Britney Spears when I was younger too. I think because Britney embodied all the things I would never, could never be. She was this all American, attractive, and energetic singer and dancer. Britney had this enviable it factor and artistry conveyed through her incredibly cultivated talents as a live stage performer. When she was intensely popular years ago, I had no true interest in her innermost thoughts. She didn't convey that kind of depth to me. But now I realize she's a rather unique celebrity in the modern age. Why is that? Well, there was a time when celebrity perception was tightly controlled by PR teams, and the public's access to reality was presented through the lens of the paparazzi. Things have shifted thanks to social media. I think what celebrities convey is certainly PR generated, but now stars have more control over their perception through what they self generate for the public's consumption. Britney Spears' life as a celebrity and our access to the reality of it took a different trajectory of sorts because of her conservatorship. While she has a social media presence now, it's on a delay compared to how the rest of stardom in popular culture has progressed. This coming from me, who is perpetually on a delay when it comes to understanding social media. When Brittany was younger, and I was younger, again, I had no real interest in finding out what was going on in her head because on the outside, she and I had absolutely nothing in common save for a love of pop music. But now, Brittany is, like me, a middle aged professional woman with two kids who's trying to reimagine herself. So when her memoir was released in late 2023, I, for the first time ever, read a book that was trending. After I finished her memoir, the first person who came to mind was my dear friend from college, Brandon. I shot him a text asking if he too was reading the Britney memoir, and yes, it was on his list. I knew it. Brandon is not only my birthday twin, he is also a fellow lover of the humanities and human culture, and Britney. So, what better way to celebrate birthdays, friendship, and literature than to invite Brandon to my studio for a book review of The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. Brandon's joining me today in the studio, and welcome, Brandon.
Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Thanks for being a sport. Brandon knows I'm a novice podcaster, but he is a loyal listener, so I'm ever grateful.
Every episode.
Tell me, Brandon, when I texted you about whether or not you were going to be reading the Britney memoir, I had a hunch you would be, but what was it about the memoir and her life that you were interested in?
Great question. Well, I love art. I love museums. I love pop culture, and I love Britney because she has always been, I feel like, part of our cultural environment for so long, ever since college. I remember hearing her first hit me baby one more time, or
Yeah.
really hit me baby.
Or maybe baby one more time.
Baby one more. Oh, God.
It's all good. We're aging gracefully.
I remember listening to the album and thinking that it was great. Just followed her ups and her downs, and then learned about her conservatorship, which made a lot of news. You know, having legal education, that was fascinating, just from a procedural and human interest aspect. So I've always been interested in what she's gone through, her various iterations in terms of her style, her music, and then her performances. And when I found out that she was going to have this book coming out, of course, that had to be read.
Well, you mentioned like her conservatorship, and I think, that's just it. It's like her name has been in the news for all kinds of reasons. But then when it came to the conservatorship, it was like the absence of Britney was felt by fans. And the curiosity to know where she was and what she was up to kind of led to a greater revelation of this conservatorship that she's under. And then I think it is her fan base that helped pull her through this period of her life and also pulled her out of this conservatorship because she knew there's a community out there waiting for her. So you're right. The trajectory of her life has been intense. And, she is this popular figure. And I think There are those characters that you come across in life that remind you of fond periods of your own life.
Absolutely.
I know I can share when she talks about her passion for singing and dancing as a little girl and feeling like she came alive. I could relate to a lot of that. Now, while I wasn't, in gymnastics class and like other dance classes and stuff, I can remember twirling and singing like a pop star in my basement. So it tickled me that I shared that in common with Brittany, and like many children do that. I was surprised to learn in her childhood how she lived and went to a performing arts school in New York. I didn't know she had this musical theater experience. I didn't know she even knew Natalie Portman. To find out that they're friends was like mind blowing. But that part of her childhood definitely left an impression on me. This how much she worked hard, how much she had a passion for music and dance, and how it led her to New York.
One of the things that we learn about in the book is that her parents had a rough go of things in Louisiana. We find that her dad was trying to hustle quite a bit in order to make ends meet. He ends up getting a gym and doing all these other things to make money. And so we find out later on, way towards the end of the book, how she thinks about growing up poor. And one thing that I was struck by was still her parents were very involved with her. A lot of times, memoirs, you learn how distant or neglectful parents are. These parents were there all the time, but at the same time, it was a hustle. That's how she ended up getting up to New York, because her mom was pushing this. They realized that their child had talent and skills and stage presence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know she mentions how her mom kept in touch with lots of points of contact that they met on their journey to stardom, if you will, and then contacting an attorney, and then like gets these introductions and these meetings for Brittany. I think what I found unique about her childhood, and I don't really hear her mention this in her memoir at all, is that it never sounds like she got any deep or meaningful guidance from her parents, or like she never really reflects on deep conversations she might have had with them. I know as a child, as an adult, so many of I'm biased here because so many of my fond memories are conversations and bits of guidance and like golden nuggets and life hacks that my parents shared with me. But it feels like she didn't have that kind of parenting. It sounds very much like she was groomed through the hustle.
Absolutely. And we learned that when she was in New York, a lot of her time was spent with Felicia.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Felicia Colada, who was her chaperone, who was great and a great confidant, but that was her mother in a way for a lot of her life, as a child, until she would go back to Louisiana. But what's interesting is while she was in New York and was doing all these things, she had great dreams of being very famous. But she also had these dreams of having normal things as well, such as having her dad stop drinking and having her mom stop yelling. One of the things that we learn is that the parents had a very contentious relationship when she was a child. So she had all these things that she was dealing with, these conflicting desires. But one thing that struck me also was her level of professionalism. She was this little girl in New York, far from Louisiana, and she was an understudy, and then took on a role in New York City. I would like to think that I'd be able to do the same thing, but I know that I probably would not have been able to do that. And so that's one of the things that really struck me was she was this little girl and she was so professional and has been her entire life.
Brittany speaks with kindness and enthusiasm when it comes to the countless number of famous people she has met during her career. And there's no doubt she's held her own performing alongside them too. The most endearing part of her interactions with famous people is that she, like us, is a fangirl of the same cultural icons. So, Brittany mentions a lot of famous celebrities in her memoir, and it's impressive the list of people that she has met in her life and the people that she's performed with. Everyone from Michael Jackson to Steven Tyler to, of course, Madonna, and to those who grew into fame alongside her, such as Dina Aguilera and Justin Timberlake next to all of them and been a powerhouse. Brendan, what are your impressions of all the names that she drops in her memoir?
That was something that really did strike me, especially when she talks about her childhood and the people that she met when she was going to be on the Mickey Mouse Club.
Mhm.
She mentions Carrie Russell
Yeah, yeah.
and Ryan Gosling and all these people that I didn't realize that she had any sort of connection to. She does mention her relationship with famous people throughout, even Colin Farrell, for instance,
Oh, yes.
after her breakup with Kevin Federline. They
Yep.
had a little bit of a love affair of sorts. But she definitely is aware of fame and she is definitely aware of how that impacts her. And one of the things that did strike me in terms of her discussion of famous people was how much she gives credit to other women, especially in the industry, who she admires. So she talks about Jennifer Lopez at some point about how she was always impressed by Jennifer Lopez's ability to be famous, but then also maintain some sort of privacy, something for herself. And she mentions at some point how she is always impressed with Reese Witherspoon, especially how she's such a nice person, but also is such a force in the entertainment industry itself, which is very difficult. At some point, she discusses how she's never been very good with dealing with the business at any
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
And we might talk about this later, but she does discuss Justin Timberlake and Kevin Federline and their relationship with fame.
When it comes to Britney and her romantic relationships, such as Justin Timberlake and Kevin Federline, she highlights the positive aspects of their time together and speaks with a deep appreciation for who they were and a great awareness for how they were as things unfolded in their lives. So let's transition and talk a little bit about a very defining relationship for Britney, which was her relationship with Justin. I love reading in her memoir about their connection from childhood, from the Mickey Mouse Club, through to her discussion about their relationship and how enmeshed they were, how dependent they were on one another, how in love they were. And I think when she reflects on their breakup, it was a really defining moment for her, a very defining experience because I get it, their lives were again so intertwined for so many years leading up to that breakup, down to their family. Like his family was her family, and while I have not gone through a breakup like that, I know often I hear about how when people have been together a long time, even just dating or married, one that bond is broken, but then the other ones are strained or pulled apart in a forced sort of way.
He definitely was her first real love. She'll always have a space for him in her heart because of that,
Mhm.
regardless of anything that happened during the relationship and after. After the breakup, she was hurt. She felt like she was played, she was manipulated. She felt that a master at taking advantage of the situation and framing the narrative of the breakup, trying to paint her as the bad guy in the
Mhm.
relationship. I remember seeing Crimey River, and the music video has this woman in it that looks surprisingly like Britney Spears. And it was a not too subtle way of suggesting that she was the bad person in the relationship. We learn in the book that he definitely played a role in the ultimate dissolution of that relationship.
Yes, no, absolutely. I remember seeing Cry Me a River, and I remember honestly, like, when you think about perception versus reality, from the perception angle, thinking, who would cheat or who would break up with Justin Timberlake? I mean, the golden couple, if you will. And like, why would she choose to be the bad guy when it's him? So Britney's spin is that she recognizes what happened after their breakup was this beautiful manipulation of the situation that was advantageous to Justin. And I don't want to say she like respected that, but she does acknowledge that that was one direction or one way to take it in. And she could see why he might have chosen that because he was coming out with his album. He needed to do the promotion and you've got to maintain your fame and or bolster it using whatever you've got at your disposal.
So interesting to see how even to this day, years later. Remember, their relationship, they were in their early 20s, if you can believe. Pretty long ago, even after all this time, it does have some impact on what is going on with their lives today.
Yeah. Once that association for Britney was really strong, that relationship. And then for the public, their association is really strong too. Again, the trajectory of their fame was very similar-ish. They performed at the Super Bowl together. Like there's so many moments that are captured in the public's eye with both of them there at center stage, that to pull them and tease them apart, I don't think that it's possible. I think it's for forevermore, really. When it comes to Kevin Federline, Brittany recognizes how she was ready to be married and start a family life, to have kids and to find respite within that sort of home environment. And she recognizes that entire marriage kind of took a strange turn where she was kind of focused on her house and her kids, and Kevin pivoted towards fame.
Right. And he did try to make a name for himself and try to start his rap career. She does not outright disparage him and his musicality and his music career. She kind of looks at it in terms of bless his heart for trying. It's a very gentle way of saying it wasn't great, but she recognizes that fame got to him.
He was young too when he got married. Their marriage wasn't long, but he was young. Something that stands out is how she never disparages him as a father in her book. And I've never heard her say anything negative about his parenting. I know that there was a situation, and you might remember the details from the memoir better than I do, where people were, oh yes, I think it was at an award show or something, and people were kind of making fun of K-Fed. And she was like, no, they should not have done that. This is the father of my children.
Right. She talks about his past drug usage and just the types of people that he's hanging out with. You start to think, wow, like how did he end up getting custody of the children? She doesn't talk about is him being a bad dad.
Yeah.
He actually is there for his kids. It seems like, and he does fight for them. It does help that she pays for everything.
Yeah. No, she does pay for everything. The marriage was definitely advantageous to K-Fed, more so than Brittany. But of course, she has her children from that marriage. And she does speak at length about how much she adores her kids, even now. And generally speaking, like what parent wouldn't? I adore my children, good, bad, regardless of the circumstances. There's a deep love for them and a deep longing for them that you can hear her share throughout the memoir whenever she references them.
The only thing that she really expresses that's really negative about him is, as a father, is that he kept them from her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really hurt her.
Again, those around her, K-Fed included, definitely took advantage of her during this conservatorship. Acts and their manipulation kind of led and fed into the conservatorship.
Right. And after the conservatorship, and after the book has been published, she still is hoping to have a relationship with her sons that's strong. They're working on that.
Mm-hmm.
She did give permission to let them move to Hawaii. Kevin Federline and his wife, Victoria Prince, moved there. She was a volleyball player at the University of Hawaii. She got a job there. He is doing, I'm not sure what, but the boys are moving there with him. And that must be hard for her, but they're almost going to graduate. And so it'll be interesting to see how her relationship with her boys develops and changes through time. Do you think they'll have listened to this?
I think for sure. I think,
or read the book.
I think if they haven't now, they will at some point. And I'm glad that she does not say anything negative about him as a father, because that would certainly impact her children, regardless of the age at which they would read it. Because whatever she's writing, a memoir is memorialized. Her children are almost adults, they're in their late teens now. I feel like she's going to have a very unique relationship with them as adult children. They're going to see, because as you grow older, you recognize that your parents aren't just your parents, they're adults that had their own lives. And so I'm curious to know how, as they have that awareness and that like revelation comes to them, how they'll engage their own mother who had such a colorful life. Britney Spears' conservatorship required her to live under restriction and scrutiny. She writes in the book, I had no freedom and yet also no security. I know what it's like to live a life with some restraint, but to have no privacy would certainly lead me and just about anybody to feel anxious and insecure. As our conversation continued, Brandon explained a lot more about the legal aspects and implications of her conservatorship.
There's a lot of stories from the outside. There's a documentary called Britney versus Spears. There's another documentary called Framing Britney. And in both of those, they talk about the conservatorship. But this was our chance in this book to hear about what it was like from her perspective and how constraining it was and how demoralizing it was for her. And then at the same time, fascinating to see her subtle ways of trying to subvert the conservatorship. And again, this was a conservatorship of her body and of her state. So they told her which shows she was supposed to be performing at and what she was supposed to be doing with her money. She was only given about $8,000 a month out of her millions of dollars that she could spend on herself. So it was fascinating to see how little she knew about her ability to reach out and get a new attorney. Throughout this whole thing, she was thinking that she couldn't get her own attorney because they found that she was too incompetent to get her own legal counsel.
Britney does secure an attorney by the name of Michael Rosengart.
He is a very well known, really large firm called Greenberg Traurig.
Oh, okay.
So he is backed by a pretty impressive firm himself. He fought really hard for her to be able to get out of this conservatorship. You know, he clerked for Souter. She was in Tahiti at Marlon Brando's estate.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not in the book, but I guess he had an island in that area, private island. She was there when she got the call from Rosengart that she was no longer in the conservatorship. You know, ever since, this situation that she found herself in really has helped move things along in terms of rectifying certain deficiencies within the law in California. As a result, the law's been changed. It's now harder to get into a conservatorship, and it is easier to get out of it. One of the things that is notable throughout her telling of this is her constant questioning, why am I in this? If I am so unable to take care of my own affairs, then why are you putting me to work and making millions of dollars for everybody around me? This conservatorship does not make any sense. Conservatorships are usually for people that aren't working, have a hard time feeding themselves. The one thing that Britney Spears will never be out of is money. She will always be able to feed herself. Yeah. She will always be able to take care of herself. And even if she does have a hard time, it'll be a long time before she runs out of money for things like Top Ramen.
Yeah. This is one of those things, she has an amazing work ethic and she was definitely taken advantage of. It seems so twisted to put someone with such a great work ethic and professionalism under a conservatorship to just hustle for everyone else around her instead of being able to enjoy the art and the craft of performing. Something Britney found herself in a lot of was rehab. My big thought on this is she didn't have a drug problem. She wasn't an alcoholic. So those reasons alone make it nonsensical for her to be in rehab. But the other issue I have with rehab is related to the professionalism of those running these facilities. Like, are they not also exploitative of someone who has money just because they can pay for something like rehab? I think it just speaks more to the idea that those around Britney who were managing her were using it as a way to silence her and to regulate her behavior within a facility. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Britney's stints in rehab that seem kind of ridiculous?
Well, one of the unfortunate things is that we'll never know what was written about her by the professionals and why she was ordered to go, because all of that is confidential. And what we know from her is she claims that she didn't do drugs. she wasn't, as far as we know, doing any of that.
Brittany shares in her book that she had depression and social anxiety. She does reveal that she took Adderall, a medication prescribed most often for ADHD, to help give her a few less hours of feeling depressed. And she took lithium during a forced stay at a psychiatric treatment facility. While she didn't turn to alcohol to feel better per se, she found herself in AA, or Alcoholics Anonymous.
She hears these stories of these women that are in AA, and she learns from them, and she really appreciates all the struggles that they've gone through. And that's what's great about Brittany, is that she connects with
Yeah.
people even though she's this super famous person.
Yeah. She is a people person. I get this impression from the memoir overall that she is this quiet, diligent worker. Doing the work helps her connect to people, and she does like to connect to people. And so even when she's not able to work and in rehab, the desire to connect with people and to kind of learn from what she's observing and hearing is still there. So it's still a sponge for trying to take advantage of whatever situation she's found herself in.
Wonderfully said.
Let me ask you this. Overall, what was your impression of the way that the memoir read?
It was efficient, concise, pretty raw. I was really feeling for her a lot of the times when she was talking about how she felt sad and how she felt wronged, but then also really impressed by her gratefulness and her self awareness. And after getting through this wonderful book, I was so impressed and happy to get confirmation about something that I think a lot of fans have felt, is that deep down, she is, and she really wants to do the best for herself, for her family, for her fans. And throughout, you really see that she has a deep appreciation for her fans. She thanks them for their involvement in the Free Britney movement, and she thinks that she has a good connection with them. She talks about how she's empathic, she can feel what other people are feeling, and she really has a connection with people. And you see that throughout the book. And so that's really wonderful to see that she has that self awareness and that we see her reflect on that. It really makes her connect with the reader and with her fans. And of course, she can't put everything in this book.
Yeah.
She can't put all of her thoughts, her relationships, her interactions. There are things that she will leave out. She can't put everything in. This isn't the fall of the Roman Empire, where they're still trying to figure out what happened with that. This is what we have. This is what we know, and these are her words. So it's still nice to see that her core, she wants to do the best, and that's really nice to see. And that's why she's so endearing.
You're right. She comes off in this memoir as just as nice as you feel like she would be if she was sitting across the table from us. And I think my big takeaway in general, something that I hadn't really considered before reading the memoir, was how, as a woman, and the title, The Woman in Me, how throughout her life tries to balance between her upbringing and the natural tendency to be deferential with seeing the need to be assertive in the professional realm, in the family realm, and how her natural tendency is to be deferential. But then ultimately, when the conservatorship came to an end, her being able to speak about her life is her chance at being assertive about telling her side of the story. In doing a review of Brittany's memoir, I thought back to all the memoirs I've read and realized I don't know how to judge what is and isn't a quote unquote good memoir because who am I to judge another person's life? I can't judge their choices, the characters in their story, the way the plot progresses, or even what they consider as the climax of their lives. And no one really has control over how their story ends. A memoir is simply a window into what seems relevant to the writer, what the writer senses will be of the most interest to the reader, and how the writer wants to be remembered. When I finished reading Brittany's memoir, I was reminded of some sage advice my older brother gave me when I went to college. Safura, if you ever do something stupid, before rumors spread, make sure you get your version of the truth out there first. maybe that's just what a memoir is. It's your version of how you want to be remembered, and it's also your version of the truth. Brittany ends on a hopeful note, and that's the best part. There is still so much time for her and for me to close some chapters and reimagine ourselves. Thank you for joining me in the studio, Brandon.
Good luck with the podcast. I love it, and you're going to do great.
Thank you for listening to Humoranities. Enjoying the podcast? Please take a moment to rate it. And for more musings, visit humoranities.com and be sure to follow on all social media platforms.